welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I will be showing you this watercolor painting that I did. This was originally painted for my Patreon and I did a full walkthrough on it down there, so if you guys want to see that, it will be linked in the description. I don't normally share what I did on Patreon over here on YouTube unless I actually do a full walkthrough of an upload that I've already done on my channel and do that for my Patreon. So this time, since I actually didn't have the time to film another video because we've been having a lot of blackouts lately, so I'm just gonna show you guys this. I also don't want to do 3 gouache videos one after the other, and I know a lot of you guys have come from my latest painting over my sketches videos, and I also want you guys to see that I do watercolor videos too. So yeah, this one was chosen by my patrons out of 2 different options that I was going to paint this month, and I actually thought that this one was going to be the easier out of the 2, and I was definitely wrong. So this is one of the only paintings that I did where I had to do a color study and sort of a technique study on. I did the same thing for my last painting on Patreon, but I don't normally need to do that, so for this one I had to. This is what the study looked like. It's just so I could see what colors work together, but also I think more importantly I wanted to plan out the techniques that I was gonna do in stages, because the reference photo sort of has lots of sharp and hazy details and sometimes one right next to each other, so I really had to plan out how I was gonna do this, and the best way that I knew I could do this was to really make use of my masking fluid. And some of you guys may know I've been having a lot of bad luck with my masking fluids lately, so I was in for a big challenge with this painting, and I'm so glad that I did that initial study because this turned out to be one of my faster paintings to finish. All in all, this took me about 4 hours to do, including the wait time for it to dry, so that's not at all that much time, especially for something that's this big. And regardless of how long other artists usually finish their watercolor paintings, but for me that is not that much time. It really only took me 2 days and only working about 3 days, about 3 hours that first day and an hour extra the next day. So a lot of that has to do with the masking fluid, because really just going off of how my other paintings went before, I knew that the one thing that I would really have to do to make this masking fluid work is for me to not leave it out overnight. So I was really forced to do most of this painting that first day so I could take out that masking fluid. So yeah, that, and also having this full painting mostly planned before I even started, that it was really just a mix of a lot of different things working together to make this painting just finish really fast for me. So a lot of this process was going off of the order of how I was gonna put in that masking fluid. So initially I just started with the flowers on the bare paper. So flowers that I'm masking in, the very first ones, are gonna end up looking just stark white or just the color of my paper. And then once I've had those first sort of brightest buds in, I started painting over where I had planned to put in the rest of the flowers with just green, and then mask those in with flower shapes. So I sort of have this bouquet of flowers that is descending in values, because even after I've put in those greens and masked those out with flower shapes, I also masked some more flowers even after I've put in the oranges and the pinks in the painting, so then I would also have flowers that are oranges and pink. I really think that because of how the reference photo is, it's sort of very, I wouldn't say that it's one-dimensional, but it's sort of the only thing I can think of right now. There's really not much going on in the reference photo other than those flowers and the differences in textures throughout the same bouquet. So if it wasn't for the flowers, the reference photo in itself is really just going to be the face with very similar colors going throughout. So yeah, I really had to focus on how I was gonna go about these flowers. Some of them I had to paint while the paper was wet so that they turn out to be more hazy and spread out along the paper. While some of them I have to obviously mask out so that they really turn out to be very sharp right next to those very hazy flowers, and it has this very nice negative painting effect to them. So yeah, even though it doesn't look like there's not that much to this painting, there really was a lot of thought that went into this. I actually think that the planning stage took me more time to do than the actual painting. I think that one of the main reasons why I like this painting so much is that it looks kind of simple, but it's actually, I mean, how I got to it was actually because of a combination of most of the things that I have learned in the years that I've been painting with watercolors. So it's in the order of how I applied the masking fluid, obviously, but it's also water control and how I chose my colors in this piece, because it is actually a very limited color palette. And I want to talk about the colors on this piece too, because it kind of does look like it's only one or two colors, but there are lots of paintings where it does look like that, but there's actually so many more colors behind the scenes to actually make it work as a finished piece. But for this, I actually only used 4 colors, and that is the Chinese orange, which is, I think, most prevalent in this piece. The best way that I can describe it is very similar to burnt sienna, except maybe a little bit more orangey. And then the pinks in this colors is just a bright red, just more watered down. But then after that, I only used 2 more colors to sort of finish the whole thing, and that is Payne's Gray and Yellow. The Payne's Gray sort of needed to contrast the very warm overall colors of the piece, but then I also used it to mix in my green. I opted out of using the blue in this piece, and I just used the Payne's Gray to mix in my own greens, and I really like that. I think the color choice is really the main thing that makes this whole thing work. And it was also one of the main things that I planned out in my initial study. The watercolors that I used are all in the Sennelier watercolor test pack that I had. There were only 5 colors in that set, but I think, especially in my full walkthroughs for Patreon, I've been really appreciating the color choices in that test pack, and I would definitely recommend that if you're just wanting to start out with artist quality watercolors. I think that is such good value. You can really make so many different color palettes with just the 5 colors that they provide. It's much more affordable than getting some of the bigger sets, which I think a lot of those colors you're not going to end up using anyway, or at least that's how I do. It's very rare for me to make use of my bigger sets, and usually I try to avoid getting them at all. With gouache, I think it's a different story, but with watercolors, definitely I don't think that you need that many colors, just because it's easier to mix your own with watercolors as compared to gouache. But yeah, the colors in this painting I really love, and I also like that it's so easy to replicate. And the last thing I want to talk about is how much water I used in this piece, because I think it was also significant. While I was painting this, I realized that I actually don't use that much wet on wet techniques in my watercolor paintings. I usually like to have a lot of control of where the water goes, and with wet on wet, I sort of leave a lot of it to chance, or maybe to just the quality of the papers and how it reacts. But usually I just like to put the watercolors where I want them to go. With this, there were a lot of times where I had to go with wet on wet, especially with the background. It's a lot more hazy, and so the shadows where I think it looks like it's from a window, the window's very far away from her, and so the shadows it's casting are very hazy. I mean, just that, it took me a while to really get the exact look that I wanted, and I think I had to do the background twice before I finally got to the look that I was satisfied with. That too, and also with the dress, which I think I underestimated because I did most of the study around the flowers. I think I overlooked how hard the dress was gonna be, and so the only thing that I sort of regret in this painting is that I had to use white to get the sheer folds of her dress right. And now that I'm speaking from hindsight, I really don't think with my skill level I could have planned it better. While I was painting it, I was frustrated because I thought that if I had just planned it better, I wouldn't have had to get the same effect with gouache. At the time, it felt like gouache was sort of a cop-out. It just seemed like the safe bet. But now that I am looking at it and I'm speaking from hindsight, I can officially say that I wouldn't have been able to plan this out better anyway. With my skill levels, I don't think I would have been able to execute that same look with just the watercolors. I think the gouache is still necessary to get this look, but it doesn't really take away from how much I love the piece. I'm still really proud of it, and I think now I can officially say that it's one of my favorite watercolor paintings. And I will actually be selling this painting on my Etsy too, so if you guys want to get a hold of it, I will leave the link in the description as well. But I am just about to lose my voice, so I think it's time to end this. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to my patrons for being in this whole process with me. Thank you to anyone else who's watching this, and I will be seeing you guys again soon.